Hi, welcome. I'm Hannah. This is Theology Therapist. And today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about therapy and connection. So I've been talking about loneliness before. I'm going to kind of talk about how connection, loneliness, belonging, all of those kind of find their place in therapy, in sort of spirituality. So we're going to kind of bring all of these together, tie them together. Therapy in its best form is a sacred space because it's a neutral space. It's a safe space from the other areas of our life. And it's a neutral zone between our inner life and the world around us. So there are a lot of different forms of therapy that aim to accomplish different goals. So 4 of those goals that I have for you today are, first, that it aims to build resilience. Second, it reflects appropriate life skills, beginnings, endings, and conflict resolution. Third, therapy can work to heal poor historical attachment with caregivers, so relationship with our parents long time ago, through a relationship between the clinician and the client, the patient. And fourth, therapy really can operate to help process new and old hurts. Few other places in our life offer such a wide range of goals and objectives and offer openings to such sensitivity. Research has shown that the biggest indicator of successful therapy is the relationship between the client and the clinician. And kind of unfortunately, finding a good therapist is sort of like dating in that you have to try it a bunch of times and meet a few people before you find someone that you usually click with. Although, disclaimer, I'm not saying that therapy is dating and that you date your therapist. So just to be clear, you just have to try a bunch of times, because one of the greatest predictors of that sort of click is chemistry, but also time and consistency. So with time, with consistency, you can build a sort of trusting relationship if that chemistry is there. So the connection between the client and the clinician is the biggest indicator of positive outcome. This means that there has to be a really strong connection and bond between the two people. So throughout the pandemic, some of my clients often said that I was the one person in their life that they spoke to regularly. This is why most therapists, including myself, are going to ask you when you begin therapy if you're willing and able to commit to weekly sessions for 4 to 6 weeks, because that's the time when you build that bond and connection together. Consistency is key, and so before you start meeting less frequently, it's important to meet more frequently, just like with friends, so that you can build up that bond and connection before you start to space out your appointments. I would tell you about 3 different experiences I've had with very different therapists. One, it was my very first time in therapy. I was seeing a clinician who was probably more of that traditional, where you go, you sit in the chair, you talk, and the person is kind of like taking notes and and like not a lot of engagement there. So that was my first experience, and I remember for like 10 months I went and I would just whirlwind in, and I would like go with the sitcom of the week, and then I would whirlwind out. And I just thought, you know what, this is not really helping me much. And so I ended up having a conversation with the therapist, and I just said, I think I'm going to try something different. And we ended up, me bringing that up ended up providing the opportunity for us to have a really productive, fruitful conversation about some of the things that she was seeing in me that were preventing us from doing really good work. And then I said, well, if you'll have me, I will still stay. And so then we kept working together, and I saw some really helpful changes happen in my life. So don't be afraid of bringing things up to your therapist. 1, that builds that familiarity factor that we're talking about today. The other experience that I've had has been when I was seeing a therapist. It was virtual, and it was the most uncomfortable probably I've ever been. They had like a chihuahua on their shoulder that was like freaking out and like squirming and they, you know, whatever, and like jumps off at some point. But they just like spent the first 10-15 minutes in the session telling me about the anxiety of this Chihuahua. Then as I proceed to kind of talk about what has brought me into therapy, they proceeded to tell me that it was all my fault. And so clearly this did not help me feel heard or seen or understood, like especially in the very beginning of therapy. You know, what we're talking about here today is that connection with the therapist. And that beginning of therapy, we are building that alliance between whether you're the client or the clinician, we are building that alliance. And so those factors made it to where I was like, all right, you know what? This is not a good fit for me, and I'd be surprised if it was a good fit for anybody. And then, you know, I have this other experience where I'm talking to the therapist and validating, lovely, like highlight some of the things that, you know, are things that are areas for growth for me, but also are really validating of me. Those are things where, you know, I know that I'm gonna see my therapist and I'm gonna come away with knowing that there are things that I need to work on, but I'm also going to come away knowing that I'm valued, I've been seen and heard, and that this person, even though we have a working relationship here, that this person actually does care about me and my well-being. So I wanted to give you like these sort of couple of different frameworks for what this could look like in the therapy process and why that first meeting matters and how it can change your experience in therapy. Again, therapy, connection to your therapist is like one of 3 factors, I would say: consistency, familiarity, and chemistry. So 2 of these are built over time, and 1 is like this metaphysical aspect. I want to be clear that therapy is not an antidote to loneliness because it is an isolated part of our lives. It is not connected to the rest of your life. It's an isolated part of your life where if you are comfortable, when you are comfortable, you can be seen and known in the messy parts of life. It's a really great way to gain insight into your patterns of behavior, into some thought patterns, or patterns that you might be engaging in your relationships that maybe you're not aware of or aware of and really not sure what to do with or how to break out of those cycles. Therapy can be a great place to gain that insight so that you can remove these barriers and hopefully develop meaningful relationships and connections in your life outside of the therapeutic space. If this is something that you have been struggling with, I encourage you to find a therapist in your area. Remember, in the state where you're located, if you're in Massachusetts and you would like to talk to me further, you can see the description. There's a link to schedule an initial screening appointment. I'd be happy to talk to you and learn more about what's going on and how or if I can help. It's good to have you here. Leave a comment below if you feel comfortable sharing how the therapeutic relationship has impacted your experience of therapy. Did having a strong connection with your therapist make a big impact? Did the opposite? Did it negatively, the relationship that you had with the therapist, did it negatively impact your experience in therapy? I'd love to hear from you, love to learn more. Can't wait to see you again next week with a new video, and I hope that you are well. Be well.